HVAC is one of the hottest sectors in the business sale today, but not every business owner get the highest valuation for their business. Why is that? My guest today has been selling HVAC companies for years, and he will help us understand how business owners can get the highest value for their business. Welcome to Business Beyond You, the one-stop hub for insights, conversations, and perspectives business owners need to build businesses that last beyond them. Hi, I'm Sara Vaziri, M&A advisor in the state of California, and today I have with me Patrick Lang, who is a HVAC business broker who is based in Florida but sells businesses all over the US. Patrick, welcome to Business Beyond You.
Thank you so much for having me on. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Since you're specialized in this specific field, I want to dedicate this episode to the owners of HVAC companies. So tell us a little bit about these kind of businesses for the people who are not familiar first, and what makes this industry so attractive to the buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a few different reasons, in my opinion. One, the industry is pretty fragmented, right? There's a lot of small companies all over the country, and not many very big brands historically, and so that's pretty attractive. Also, as we saw during COVID and other things, they're fairly recession resistant, right? If I'm in Florida, as I mentioned, I joke the reason I bought a heating and air company is I don't know a husband dumb enough to tell his wife they're not going to fix the air conditioner, right? At the end of the day, I think today it's going to be 90 degrees here and our air conditioner is running, right? So during COVID, during market downturns, during things like that, heating and air has become more of a need instead of a want. And so I think that's super helpful. And many of these businesses have been run by technicians who are great technicians, but not great business owners, right? And so there's a lot of low hanging fruit for a buyer with some business savvy to put things together and to be able to make more money from those businesses.
Makes sense. So the audience of Business Beyond You are business owners who have businesses with $1 to $5 million EBITDA. For these type of businesses, who is the typical buyer? Is it owner operators, private equities, strategic buyers? What do you see in the market?
Really, it's a little bit of everything. The market seems to go through phases. When I first became switched my practice to just selling heating and air, it was every buyer seemed to be a mom and pop buying another mom and pop, right? Somebody wanted to expand from one part of the state to another or from one state to another, and they did that through acquisitions. And then private equity really got involved, and there was a few years there that almost every transaction we did was a financial buyer of sort, private equity, family office, that type of thing. Now, we did 24 deals last year, and probably half of those that we sold, around 10 or 12 of those were private equity buyers. And then the other 12 to 15 were a mixture between mom and pops, some people looking to expand. And then there's these entrepreneurs through acquisition. So it's become attractive for people outside the trades to buy trades companies, and they're trying to buy them as well. So really it's a little bit of everything out there.
So when you go and talk to a HVAC business owner, what kind of signs you see that tells you this is a good business? I can get a good multiple on this business, good valuation on it. What
Yeah.
are those signs?
Yeah, so a few things, right? And you've already touched on one of them. So EBITDA above $1 million is super attractive to anywhere in the country, right? There's buyers that are looking for things of scale. We often preach getting themselves out of the van, right? So if every Google review has the owner's name on it, then they probably have a high-paying job, not a great business. And so we stress to get out of the van. Now, once they get to certain income levels, they have to be, or the business wouldn't survive. So that income helps dictate that. Staying away from new construction. Buyers are scared to death of new construction, rightfully so. And often it's a race to the bottom, and there's not a lot of loyalty in the contractor space. And so a business that's built on service, repair, and replacement. So maintenance agreements with a customer, recurring revenue in the customer's home often, kind of those four things. If they focus on those and have built their business based upon that, there's going to be a lot of buyer interest and they'll be able to sell at a fantastic multiple.
Hmm. So if they can focus on making maintenance agreements with like industrial companies like that, that makes it a recurring revenue, that's a very good plus.
Yeah, absolutely. And with homeowners, right? There's a lot of companies we sell that have maintenance agreements with individual homeowners, and that reduces the risk even more. You and I were talking before we started recording about, customer concentration being one of those things. And so the beauty of residential is instead of having 1, 10, 15, or 100, big customers, they'll often have thousands and thousands of maintenance agreements in place. So that risk is spread out over thousands of people.
And it makes it more attractive. So, what are the biggest red flags that you see? If you see something like that in a business, you say, "Oh my God, this will be a problem."
Yeah, there's really a few of them that we look at when we do the first valuation, and one is going to be that customer concentration, right? Are they just working with a few key people? Construction exposure. Are they doing construction? And if they are, how much exposure do they have to construction? And the big one, which I'm sure you see every day, is clean books and records, right? A lot of people do what they can to save taxes, and a business built to save taxes is not the same as a business built to maximize sale price. And so, looking at those are the leading things we look at one of the first calls we have.
Yeah. I want to add in the state of California, one of the problems we face is having illegal employees, believe it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's something that gets vetted on every transaction. They're gonna pull the paperwork to make sure I-9s or whatever forms that have been completed or need to be completed are
Yeah, we
are
had a
current.
great business that the private equity put a very good offer, and they just when they found out there are illegal employees there, they just didn't go forward. That's
Yeah, and
easy.
that's not just California; that's nationwide, right? I mean, that's a reality across the country,
Mhm.
and it's going to come to light. So being aware of that ahead of time is super smart.
It's very important. So, how much is important that the business can run without the owner? Is it something that's important in this type of business?
Yeah, and it doesn't always happen, right? So we still sell a lot of businesses that have owner involvement. What I tell sellers though is when the business is not completely dependent on the owner, it opens you up to a bigger class of buyers, right? There's more people that are going to become interested. And to me, the more people, brokers like you and I, are able to get interested in the listing, often the higher sale price they're able to achieve, right? There's buyer competition, more buyers equal higher sale price, which everyone wins in that environment. So absolutely, it's definitely a huge benefit.
Yeah, that's the discussion we always have. The more buyers I can get interested, the higher I can get your value. If there's only one buyer that's a good match, how can I negotiate with them?
Well, and especially in the trades, right? If you're doing a lot of the technical work and that buyer has to have the technical background to be able to come in and backfill that, now you're eliminating tons of buyers who don't have necessarily the technical background. They have the business ability, they have the money, they have the resources, they check all the boxes, but they can't turn a wrench. Then you're eliminating people from the transaction and hurting valuation.
Exactly. Yeah, I had a waterproofing business, and the owner was the only person who knew how to do it. So how can I sell this business, How can I find somebody who has been doing the same thing for 40 years to exactly replace you and the clients trust you? It's just
Yeah.
make it, yeah, unsellable.
Reality is you can in every state, obviously, not every state, many states have licensing requirements on the heating and air side as well. And so knowing who the license holder is or that buyer's ability to get a license is super important in that process also.
Exactly. How about having a strong management or a lead technician? What kind of effect does that have on the valuation?
Huge, huge, right? Knowing that there's a team that can continue running the business after the seller leaves makes a buyer feel much more confident in that transition period. And as a result, once again, comes back to higher price.
How often do you see these kind of companies have systems and SOPs and those kind of things in place? And how does that help?
Not as often as I want to. I can tell you, we see
I
them.
have to ask, do you even see?
Yeah, not as often as we want to, and the ones that do are the ones that are selling for record multiples that everybody talks about. Right? It's a business built on systems is worth way more money than a business dependent on the owner. At the end of the day, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a business consultant that there are businesses built from zero to this valuation, and then these private equities come in and get them and bring them from here to there. Now, if the owner does a part of the things that those private equities do, then they can capture a part of this value themselves instead of handing all of it over to them, just adding these systems, management. There are simple things you can do and use the consultant or something like that to achieve it. And I think you can get a lot more if you just spend some time doing those stuff. What is your experience on this?
Definitely, and we're seeing buyers come in now and do that. I've seen people who've sold. They may have been young when they sold to private equity, and they stayed on with them for a little while, and they saw what they were doing and said, "Wow, we could do the exact same thing." And now they're moving to another location and duplicating it, and they're growing much faster. It's not dependent on them. They understand that model, and we've also had businesses that we sold and the kids worked in the business. And so the parents sold the business, the kids worked there, the kids stayed on and watched what private equity was doing and said we could do the exact same thing. And they've left and gone on their own and done it. So success leaves clues. And absolutely, they're building businesses of higher value, but also easier businesses to run, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if the business is not dependent on you and you're not having to be there 24 hours a day, it's a much more fun business to run and typically more profitable.
Exactly. So we always ask them, if you're going to a vacation for a couple of weeks, what happens to your business?
And often the answer is it closes down, unfortunately.
Exactly. That's the problem. So you touched a little bit about the clean financials. Let us know more about it. How often do you see good financials, good enough for a sale?
And not as often as we want to, right? Again, it's too many people think that it's okay, and I won't mince words, to cheat on your taxes. Right at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. And if you put yourself in a buyer's shoes, if you're risking lying to the federal government, potentially going to jail, am I as a buyer going to trust you? Right? It puts a fear in the buyers. And if the financials are not clean, it almost always eliminates SBA financing. So now it has to be a cash buyer that buys your business. And so if people would do the math on what they're saving on taxes versus what we would be able to sell the business for if we were able to prove that income, they would pay the taxes every single time and have a higher value business is the reality. And unfortunately, they don't hear that until it's too late. So I'm glad you're doing shows like this, so hopefully educating them so
Yeah,
that
I'll
they
tell them
do
at
realize it.
least, 2, 3 years before you want to sell, start doing it correctly. If you
Yeah,
don't want to do
absolutely.
it all the time, at least 3 years before selling your business, is start doing that.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
So, you know, the business owners we get in touch with, they always have to make decisions about their business. And one of these decisions is investing to grow the business or just moving forward. If somebody is close to the time they want to sell in a HVAC company, do you think it's a good decision to start investing to, for example, expand the business? What is your thought about that?
Yeah, great question. And I have mixed emotions about it, right? Because oftentimes growth can be expensive. And specifically in the trades, if you're hiring a new technician and you have to now pay money and train them and bring them on board, and you buy a new van and buy new uniforms and buy new tools, you don't always generate enough revenue to justify that, right? So it's hurting the bottom line instead of helping it. And I think my answer is it really depends on when you're planning on selling. So if you say, hey, I'm going to sell in the next 6 months, well, then doing that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. If you say, hey, I'm going to sell 2 or 3 years from now, then it makes incredible sense to do it. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity. So I think it's really where you at on the timeline for your business, and how long is it going to take you to recoup those expenses? Because just spending for the sake of spending doesn't always produce an immediate return. And oftentimes you could focus on profitability or other things that would help you in the sale price as well. So you have to look at where you are in that time horizon.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Sometimes I tell them that just having a story that, yeah, I'm doing this and this will happen in the future, nobody pays for that. They
Right.
will pay for what you have proved that's working.
Right.
So, um, so how often do you see the sellers stay involved after they sell? How often the buyers need them to stay involved after they sell their HVAC company?
Yeah, I'm kind of biased on this for some reason. Most of the sellers, when they get to me, they're done, right? I don't have a lot of sellers who are saying, "Hey, I want to sell in 5 or 10 years." They're ready to be done. So I don't have sellers stick around a lot. I talk to other brokers who sell heating and air companies, and they tell me every seller they have sticks around, right? And so I think a lot of it depends on who the buyer is. I think it depends on seller timeline. But once again, back to more interested buyers, if you're open to sticking around for a period of time, you open yourself up to more buyers and can drive a better price. And so that's the reality of it. The more flexibility you have in the transaction, the more buyers you're able to attract, the bigger the check you're often able to write, or cash, I guess.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. We always tell them that the more options you have, the more buyers you get. Again, it's a numbers game. The more buyers we get, the more offers, the more competition, the higher price. So it's always dependent.
Exactly. It all ties together.
Exactly. So, do you have any experience that the seller got surprised by anything in a due diligence period? They didn't expect that kind of thing to happen. Is there an example you can share with us?
Yeah, too many horror stories. I think um, yeah, I think errors in their accounting. I've had a seller where they miscategorized something, and so the number was not as accurate as they thought it was going to be. I've had that happen. I've had sellers who um, maintenance agreements are a big thing, and so they miscounted their CRM system, miscounted the number of maintenance agreements, and when they were doing the due diligence, they had a lot less than they thought they actually had. And if a buyer is making an offer based on certain assumptions, those things being incorrect, come back to haunt you. So things like that, we try, and I'm sure you do as well, Sara. We try to vet our deals a lot before we go to market, and we don't want things blowing up in our face, right? It's a lot of energy and it's a lot of effort to go to market and find a buyer and market and advertise and promote. And as brokers, we've got a reputation to protect, and so we do everything we can to vet the numbers. So thank goodness we don't have a ton blow up in our face, but it does happen from time to time because mistakes happen, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, everyone's human, and most sellers are not accountants, right? And they're trusting somebody to do that kind of work, and sometimes things don't get entered the way they thought they were, and so things happen. So we try to keep those to a minimum, but they do happen, unfortunately.
Yes. I was talking to a seller yesterday. I look at their balance sheet and it was 130,000 customer deposits. So I was talking to him. I said, no, I don't have any customer deposits. I'm seeing it in your balance. Yeah, it has been there forever. Yeah, you have to clean that. If I go to
Right.
market and they put an offer based on that, that's something you have to pay. So,
And they talk about balance sheet. Inventory is one of the biggest ones we see in the trades. They just put a number in there, right? They don't ever take inventory, or they don't check inventory, and that number is often way wrong. And if I'm buying your business based on $300,000 of inventory that you had on your balance sheet, and we go inside to do inventory, and you've got $20,000, as a buyer, I'm going to have a problem with that, right? At the end of the day.
Yes, exactly. So as you said, we spend a lot of time vetting the owners. We want to make sure if we accept, to work with somebody, it's something we can get it to the end. What are some example of the times that you can say that, okay, I passed this, I'm not getting involved in this kind of deal? Has there been any kind of situation that you said, sorry, I'm not working on this deal?
Yeah, a few things. One, if there's anything that I feel ethically is not correct there, if the seller appears unethical to me, I won't have anything to do with it. And the other thing is, I believe buying and selling a business is a marriage, not a divorce, right? I don't think somebody has to lose. And so if the seller comes to me thinking that they have to win and that, the other side has to overpay for something, I think the market dictates valuation. As long as we're, as brokers, present it to a strong buyer pool, the market's going to be in line with where we have it priced. And I don't think somebody has to lose, right? It's somebody's legacy they're buying, and I want a buyer to feel comfortable calling the seller to ask the seller questions after the deal. And I want the seller to feel comfortable answering their phone. And I feel if it's an adversarial relationship, then that's bad from the start. And so I think if the seller's one-sided, then it's not a good fit for me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very important. So, as we are getting to the end, I want you to give one piece of advice to the HVAC owners who are planning to sell their businesses in, let's say, in 3 to 5 years from now. What kind of suggestion you have for them?
Get a valuation done now, right? Most people that we come in contact with have no clue what their business is worth. They were at a trade show and somebody got on stage and said they sold it for X amount of dollars, or they heard the guy down the street sold theirs for X amount of dollars, and mine's bigger than theirs, so mine should be worth more money. Most people have no clue. And too often we sit across a table from sellers and have to break their heart, right? We have to tell them that, hey, you've done it wrong. And I'd rather have that conversation today and know that they've got 3 to 5 years to fix it than to have it 3 to 5 years from now and say, hey, it's too late. You've done it wrong. And so getting a valuation done now, because as brokers, we're in a position, in my opinion, not just to sell their business, but to also say, hey, here's what it's worth today. But if you did X, Y, and Z, it could be worth a lot more. And here's what you can focus on, because we interact with buyers every single day. So we're in a position to know what the market's looking for. And so if they do that now, then they're not surprised, right? For most of our
Yeah.
clients, I'm sure your case is the same as mine. Their business is their largest asset. And most of my sellers have never sold a business. So they don't know about the process. They don't know what it's really worth, and they're not experts in doing it. And so getting that relationship started now, getting on the track, and we do valuations every single year for those people and say, okay, here's where we are now. Let's make sure we're going to be where you want to be in 3 to 5 years. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, because then they will have enough time to solve any issues before it
Correct.
gets late. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for joining us. I would like to ask you to share your contact information if there is an HVAC owner who wants to reach out to you, get your help. How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is businessmodificationgroup.com. My name's Patrick Lang, Lange. I'm super active on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn. We've got a YouTube channel that probably has 70 or 80 videos about buying or selling. Reach out any way they can. I'd love an opportunity to help out and answer any questions they have. And thank you so much for doing this and educating people, and for having me on. I've had a fantastic time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.